and welcome back to yet another video. This week I am continuing my Cardcaptor Sakura costume, and in this part we will be making the red dress. If you want to see how I made the other parts, be sure to check in the description down below. I'll link all of the parts down there so you don't miss anything. And with all that being said, let's dive on in. First of all, let's talk about fabrics. For the main part of the red dress, I have decided to go with this gorgeous colour shifting red to pink fabric. Now I found it's actually really difficult for the camera to pick up that subtle colour shift, but promise you it is gorgeous. Now the reason I chose a colour shifting fabric is because in every single reference image of this particular dress, it crosses the entire spectrum of red to pink. There is not a single photograph where it is the same red. So that is why I have gone for something that gives you the best of both worlds. Yes. Moving right along. Next we have the lining fabric. Now I searched high and low for what I thought would be a really easy fabric to find. I wanted to use some sort of Sakura blossom print because like how cute would that be, but all I could find was this. So it'll have to do. It's just a 100% cotton fabric that's nice and sturdy, gives a lot of backing to the very flimsy outer dress fabric that we're using. So that's cool. On to the pattern. Now for the pattern, I'm using Butterick B5748 as the base. The reason I'm choosing this one is because I've used it before, it's a really nice fit, and it means I won't have to do a mock-up of it, which is fantastic. The only alteration I will be making to it is I'm going to lower the scoop of the neckline so that it sits just above the bust rather than at the neckline. And then of course I will be changing the skirt part of it as well. Instead of doing a full circle skirt, I'm going to do a double circle skirt just to give all that extra flounce and puff that this dress obviously requires. And finally, for the trim that runs along the bottom edge of the skirt, I have actually designed my own embroidery pattern, and it's made up of like some of the elements from the clow cards themselves, and I will hopefully be putting that along the entire bottom edge of the skirt. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. And finally, you'll need a 14-inch invisible zip. Just like the beginning of any project, I start this one by cutting out all of my pattern pieces first. So I cut it out of the red fabric first, and then the same pieces again out of the lining fabric. Once all of the pattern pieces are cut out, I then use my ancient tracing paper and a tracing wheel to transfer any of the notches and markings onto the fabric. And then the first thing I sew together are the darts in the front of the bodice. Repeating with the lining fabric, of course. I then use the iron and press the darts nice and flat, and then I get to sew the bodice front and back pieces together at the shoulders. Next, I join the lining fabric to the fashion fabric layer and I sew that along the neckline. Once they're sewn together, I then do some understitching. And then I press it all nice and flat using my iron. Next, I sew up the side seams. Ta-da! The bodice is done. Look at this, look how nice these lines are. I am so happy with it. I got the scoop absolutely perfect. I'm just having a really proud moment right now. But now, it is time to move on to the skirt. As I said earlier, I'm cutting out a double circle skirt, so that means I make the waist hole half the size I would regularly. And that's because when you sew the two circle skirt pieces together, the half measurement will then become a hole. And here I've put in some guidelines for where I want to place the embroidery along the bottom edge of the skirt. But first I sew up the side seams so that the embroidery will be one continuous piece. And here is the first bit of embroidery on the skirt. If you look over here, I don't know how this happened, but a hole ended up in it, which is horrible because this is actually part of the skirt that you're going to see. So I'm going to have to figure out how to fix that somehow, but main thing to look at here is the embroidery. I think it looks pretty neat. So I made a mistake. I just spent the last several hours doing all the embroidery along the edge of the skirt here, only to realise that I did it on the wrong mark line that I'd drawn out. It needed to be sitting here, because as you can see, it's currently too high, which means that when I hem it, it is too short. Luckily though, I had enough fabric to cut out a whole nother skirt, and through the magic of video editing, this is how it's looking now. It has taken 3 days for me to get to this point where the first lot of embroidery is done. Now I've just got to put moons in between each of the sun patterns, and then I can move on to rhinestoning. For gluing, I'm using this glue because my normal one was out of stock, but I found that it glued the pieces on quite nicely. Now that the embroidery and bedazzling is finished, it's on to hemming the skirt itself. For the hem, I'm going to use horsehair braid, which is this plastic type webbing, and I'm going to sew that into the bottom edge, and it'll make it all nice and puffy and flouncy, which is exactly what you want from a magical girl skirt. First things first though, I overlock the bottom edge of the skirt just to give it a nice finish. Then I sew the horsehair braid to the right side of the skirt, and I do this about ½ a centimetre from the bottom edge of the hem. Then I flip it and reverse it. And then using a long straight stitch, I sew about a 2 centimetre hem. With the skirt being finished, it's finally time to attach it to the bodice. And lastly, I put an invisible zipper in the centre back. And just like that, the dress is done. And there you have it. That is how I made the red dress portion of my Cardcaptor Sakura costume. Now I absolutely adore this. I'm so glad that I ended up going with the embroidery in the end, because there was a minute there where I was double guessing it and thought, maybe I could just do a ribbon. It would be a lot easier, but I think it just looks so much nicer with the embroidered edge. As you can see, I have completed the entire costume. If you'd like to see how the white dress and the petticoat were made, I'll link the videos down below. Next week I will be releasing how all the accessories were made, and then following after that, the props. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of it. If you do like this video, make sure you drop a like down below as well. And remember, I do a lot of sewing, crafting and fun related things here on this channel, and I'll see you guys next week. Goodbye!